so make sure you speak in the...
I got a little... Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the Newsroom Pub. I'm Milwaukee Press Club President, Mary Ann Lazarski, and I'm glad to see a full house again. Thank you for being here. We are here today with Jilly Gokalgandhi, Vice President of the Milwaukee Public Schools Board of Directors. Little background, first of all. She was first elected to the MPS board in 2021 and has emerged as a key spokesperson for the district as it deals with severe financial problems that came to light in recent months. Earlier this month, state officials released data showing Milwaukee Public Schools will receive about $81 million less in state general school aid in the 2024-25 school year. An estimated $42.6 million of that reduction was caused by an adjustment from the state's Department of Public Instruction after MPS failed to report financial data properly in the 2022-23 school year. The financial problems were revealed less than 2 months after district residents narrowly approved a $252 million referendum intended to help cover a projected $200 million deficit for the 2024-25 school year. Okay, so now before we get started, I'd like to thank our event sponsors. As always, our presenting sponsor is Spectrum News 1. Our supporting sponsor is We Energies, page 2. I'd also like to thank our event partner, WizPolitics.com. WizPolitics partners with the Press Club for this luncheon as part of its ongoing event series in Milwaukee, sponsored by UW-Milwaukee, Wisconsin Academy of Global Education and Training, 1125 at Pabst, Medical College of Wisconsin, Commercial Association of Realtors, and Spectrum. I'd also like to welcome our media panel for today, Corey Hess from Wisconsin Public Radio, Rory Linane from Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and Jenna Ray from TMJ4 News. So now please welcome our guest, Jilly Gokalgandhi.
Okay, I was told to speak into the microphone, so can you hear me back there? Okay, great. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Jilly Gokalgandhi. I proudly serve as the Vice President of the Milwaukee Public School Board. So I am really happy to see a full house when we talk about Milwaukee Public Schools. Truly, over the last couple months, I think is the most engagement I've seen since the 3 years I've been on the board. And it's been bumpy, but genuinely, I am so thankful to everyone for taking such an intense level of interest and the level of conversation that we've had around what does it take for kids to thrive and for our communities to thrive. And so that's why I'm here, right? This Newsmaker Luncheon is not about me. It's about our kids, it's about our families, and it's about the sustainability of our community. And so I am just simply someone who stepped into a part-time role and has had a roller coaster of 90 days. And so let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a proud Milwaukee resident. I've lived here for a decade. I graduated from Marquette University. I am a proud public education advocate. As you heard, I served on the Milwaukee Public School Board since April 2021. So I guess the first red flag really should have been running for office during COVID. So I guess if I didn't pause and think if I really want to do this now, I'm in the same situation. So I'm also a multilingual millennial immigrant. Don't hold my millennialism against me. And fun fact, I have a full-time job. Yes, believe it or not, a mortgage-paying, bill-paying job that supports me at American Family Insurance, where I focus on investing in education priorities through the Dreams Foundation. So back to why I'm here today. Late last spring, I received an email in my inbox from the Department of Public Instruction that shook my world. And as I was doing that, as I was receiving this email, my first thought was not being chased by the media in the parking lot of Milwaukee Public Schools, but actually walking down my neighborhood and looking at my neighbors in their eyes, because I live on a block where almost every single person not only sends their children to Milwaukee Public Schools, but teaches at Milwaukee Public Schools. And so you want to talk accountability, that's right outside my door. Every single day is accountability. And so something that I really had the privilege of doing, when you live in a community where people care about the community, they also want answers, right? And so pretty quickly, I was asked a ton of questions. I was asked, what are you going to do? How are you going to fix this? And what is your plan for moving forward? And so I was invited into my neighbors' homes, into my constituents' homes, and they said, what is the path forward? And the question that I heard over and over and over again is my kid's education going to be okay? And so I listened and I reflected, and over the last couple months, this board has taken accountability around what has happened and how we plan on moving forward. This board is a board of 9 part-time school board members. And let me tell you what we've done in the last couple months. You've seen a change of leadership. We have a new superintendent. We have an acting CFO. And we are in search for a new comptroller. We have a new board clerk, so the board itself is looking at our practices and the internal controls around policy and constituent services and the relationships that we have within MPS. We're also expediting hires in our finance department and ensuring that staffing is our #1 priority. I've been asked a lot of tough questions over the last couple months, and they're all really fair. And I hope that as I proceed, that you get a better sense of where we are and where we're going. I also just want to contextualize a little bit about what MPS is, right? We are a $1.5 billion organization that serves nearly 70,000 students with 20% requiring special education needs. We offer more than 150 different types of education, including STEAM and AP classes. And we employ near 10,000 teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators, and non-teaching staff. And this morning I was just thinking, I did a little bit of research. It turns out that MPS's revenue, we compare to some small countries, including Micronesia and the Marshall Islands, okay? So I'm talking in a global context here. And I work for corporations, so I also wanted to just do some comparison, right? Like, where do we land in terms of big corporates? It also turns out that MPS is comparable to some big Fortune 500 companies. And so, again, I just want everyone to understand the level, the grave responsibility of a part-time elected board over an institution that is responsible for being a big employer in this city, for being the major education system in this city, and for being a part of the socioeconomic fabric of this city. So let's look at how we're serving our kids and a little bit about our funding mechanisms, right? In 2023, a report from Forward Analytics, which is a nonpartisan research group in Wisconsin, showed that Wisconsin's K-12 schools increasingly rely on dollars approved at referenda to fund local education. So here's the reality. In 100 school districts, referenda-approved dollars funded more than 10% of district spending. In 14 of those districts, referenda dollars paid for more than 25% of funding. This means $1 in $4 are being funded by referendum when our state legislature is sitting on $7 billion of revenue. And we all know that our schools are funded by tax revenue limits, right? And this was imposed on schools around 1993. So let's talk a little bit about the effects of what that means. Since 1993, 82% of Wisconsin school districts have put more than 1,500 operating referendum questions on the ballot. And over 58% of those were approved. Because our communities understand that if we don't fund our schools, the domino effect of that ripples to all of us, regardless or not if we have children in the school system. Last year, Wisconsin approved spending totaling $650 million. That's up $180 million in 2010. And again, I want to emphasize that we are sitting on $7 billion of revenue. This is a drop in the bucket of what our kids need and deserve. So let's talk a little bit about how MPS spends their dollars. At MPS, 90% of our 2022-23 budget dollars went directly to classrooms. So again, let me help you contextualize what that means. Out of every dollar, 90 cents is going to our classrooms. And that's what our community said. They said, we want you to put more money in our classrooms. And I fundamentally agree with that. But what does that leave? That leaves 10 cents for an administrative function of a $1.5 billion school district that serves 70,000 students. And so when people ask me, how did we get here today? Well, look at the combination of the funding mechanisms that we have, where we have to go to ask for money, and who we fund and how we fund it. And so I want to bring this back to the children and families of our community. The MPS board has taken great steps for accountability. This is the fastest I have seen a bureaucratic institution move in 2 months, and I have worked in the public, private, and non-governmental sectors. The other thing that we are really focusing on with our new board clerk is looking at our constituent services, our data and our practices, as well as how we move forward in rebuilding trust and relationships with the administration to ensure that we are never in this place again. And so I am personally heartened to know that we are on the right path forward. In September, we are going to welcome our students back into our buildings. That's like T-minus tomorrow, it feels like to me. And so we have a big responsibility ahead of us. At the end of the day, the kids and our families are our number one priority. So we need to make sure that our schools and our systems are ready to respond to their needs. And so thank you so much for your time, and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Hey, Julie, thank you for being here. So the school district and DPI staff were meeting quarterly since April 2023. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? Better?
Do you want to come up here?
Is it on?
Do you want to try this one?
Sure. Yeah. All right. So the school district and DPI were meeting quarterly since April of 2023, and then monthly starting in February 2024 and weekly in March of 2024. That means that the district knew about the financial problems before going to the referendum. I think a lot of people that live in Milwaukee and voted feel duped by the district. So how could, knowing the state of the district's finances, how could you ask for the referendum to be passed? $252 million.
Thanks, Corey. So again, I found out about the financial issues we were having when DPI sent me that letter, when that letter landed in my inbox on that Friday. And so I understand what you're saying. I genuinely get the perspective, and I want our constituents to know that this board, once we found out what had happened and what had been going on, took responsibility. So we got that letter on a Friday. On a Monday, you saw a meeting where we had parted ways with our superintendent. The following week, you saw a meeting where the CFO and the district had parted ways. Then you saw our comptroller leave. And now you're seeing two new leaders, our board clerk, as well as our new interim superintendent. And so that's one part of the question. The other part of the question, Corey, is that, again, in my comments, we have heard that the referendum is not an MPS problem. It is a statewide K-12 system problem. You heard me say that over 100 school districts have to go to referendum because they do not have enough money to operate. And so the referendum is not an MPS problem. It is a Wisconsin school system funding problem.
One of the things, can you guys hear me now? One of the things that you said in your opening comments, though, was that MPS has this more revenue than the Marshall Islands. Is that right?
I was just comparing in terms of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But one of the big things in the reports since the financial mishaps came out was that you have outdated software. Mm-hmm. Basically, you guys are using spreadsheets, which can't even communicate with DPI. How does that happen? I mean, how does that happen if you've got the more revenue than a country?
Right. Well, and that happens because we put 90 cents of every dollar into our schools. And so that comes back to this 10 cent of administrative funding. And again, I agree, the majority of our money should go to our schools, right? But then that leaves vulnerability in our ability to operate efficiently. I mean, we had, and you're right, we had staffing issues in our buildings. And again, I work for a corporation, so I understand, right? To be competitive in this market, in this job market, if you look at the average salary of what we're giving someone working in finance at Milwaukee Public Schools, that doesn't even compare to what I could get going to Manpower, Rockwell Automation, or even American Family. So when we talk about retaining, hiring, and keeping people at the best talent at MPS, that's really difficult to do. And because we're in a situation where we don't have the dollars to do that. We can't compete. And so, again, I understand what you're saying, and I recognize that as a board member and someone who pays taxes in the city of Milwaukee. And at the same time, I believe that this is a multi-pronged problem that we have to all think about really deeply.
I want to go back to what Corey first asked. You guys have known about the problem before May, before you took action, before the superintendent resigned, before Martha Kreitzman resigned. So why was the referendum put in place if you knew the financial state of the district? TMJ4 has spoken with past financial central office employees, and they started in 2015 and said that these problems existed then. I think we understand where the money is going, but that doesn't seem like it should dictate how the systems are operating. You should have the correct systems in place to be funneling that money appropriately, and it doesn't seem like that's happening.
So again, I want to make a distinction between why we need referendum dollars and what the problems were at the school district, right? And so I want to start with just a little bit of information about what we knew, right? And what did we do, right? The board asked, if you go back and watch, and I have sat and watched over and over again our committee meetings and really said, trying to reflect on what was my responsibility? Where do I fit into this? And we had asked questions over and over again. We were told that significant work was underway to address the weaknesses found in the audit. We were told, we were given claims of vast improvements, of meeting more deadlines. And it wasn't just the administration. Our partners in this work had also reassured us that work was moving forward. So that's one thing, right? So, but the other part is, and I don't want to conflate the referendum and the problems. The referendum was still needed. We are still facing operational dollars that weren't going to allow us to move forward as a district. So I want to make really clear that these are two separate issues.
So again, talking about the letter that you received from DPI, and for those who don't know, basically that letter threatened to withhold funding from MPS because its financial reports were so overdue. What did you know about the state of the finance office before you received that letter, and what have you learned about the state of the finance office since receiving that letter? And in hindsight, do you see anything that the board could have done differently to push administrators for more information about that or to intervene in this situation earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's what we knew, right? The auditors attributed turnover and staff and DPI systems changes. So we knew that there was staff turnover. But here's what we were doing even at that point. We had contracted 2 entities to help fill 6 identified staff positions. And we were given reassurances that these contracted staff positions were going to turn into full-time staff positions, right? And so again, as a part-time board member, I'm not going to be at MPS every day saying, hey, have you gotten these applications? I'm going to trust my administration to tell me what's happening. So that was one thing. The second thing is that we had been told that all of these, that the work was underway to address these issues. So that's one part. What do I know now? So I've actually had the opportunity, now I am over involved probably than a part-time board member should be. And I've met with all of our finance staff. I have a really clear understanding of whose expertise matches where. I attend probably morning meetings with DPI 3 times a week now. It was every day. And so now I'm in the weeds to a point where a part-time board member probably shouldn't be. And and reflecting on what we can do better, right? Again, I said that we need to look at our internal practices. And so I'm really excited that Dr. Tina Owen Moore is our new board clerk. She just started on Monday. I met with her yesterday, and we really talked about 4 priority areas to fix the Office of Board Governance. So 1 is looking at our data and communication systems, right? 2, looking at constituent services. 3, looking at the relationships we have with administration and the communication and trust rebuilding that we need to do. And 4, the strategic visioning of this office.
So other than just looking forward at what you can do differently, reflecting, is there anything you think that could have gone differently? Yeah,
I absolutely think we could have asked harder, tougher questions, right? I don't deny that at all. But when you're given, again, as a part-time board member, when you're given reassurances over and over and over again, and it's not that we didn't ask questions. If you go back and watch the committee meetings, hard, tough questions were asked. We were given reassurances that didn't materialize.
So there's going to be an announcement later today that nearly 40,000 people have signed recalls of you and other board members. Do you think that you and your fellow board members did anything wrong besides not asking hard questions?
I think being elected to office means taking the good with the bad. And I believe that over the last couple months, this board has shown a level of accountability to the district by parting ways with our superintendent, parting ways with our CFO, and inviting a new board clerk in. And so I completely understand and respect the will of the voters. My job right now as an elected official is to do the hard work every day to ensure that we are, one, Rory, to your point, reflecting on what we can do better in this moment, but two, also moving forward and setting up a new board or whoever it is that comes in with the right systems and controls for them to operate really efficiently. 40,000
people signing a recall. Do 40,000 people normally vote for a school board election?
My election, I think, had 5,600, and that's like a pretty high turnout election. Yeah.
Will you rerun? Will you try to keep your seat?
I am trying to focus right now on my job and what I'm doing and making sure that our kids in September are prepared to come back to school.
So kind of building off that, the recall is just one of many discussions that have been happening about basically taking power away from the current school board. There's also been discussions about mayoral takeover, governor takeover, eliminating the school board or breaking up the district. What are your thoughts on the suggestions of taking power away from the current board, and what do you think is needed to improve the governance model of MPS and ensure accountability? And I mean, you were mentioning just how much of a challenge it is as a part-time board member to hold administrators accountable. What do you think could make a stronger governance model for MPS?
Yeah, so I think that you've seen that the governor and the mayor have both rejected takeover conversations. I believe that the public school system should have a publicly elected school board. And when we think about like the seriousness of governance, I think we have to really think, what is the expectation of a part-time elected school board? What is the expectation of a part-time elected school board to our schools and our communities? I have 21, 22 schools in my district. I think I have about 20,000 more constituents than our alderperson does. And so I think we as a community need to have a really serious conversation about, what do we expect? What are the expectations?
I want to talk a little bit about the corrective action plan that was put in place with you guys, Todd Gray, and DPI to kind of move forward and alleviate some of the financial issues that you guys are having. One of the biggest black holes that we saw in that corrective action plan was staffing, specifically in central office and more specifically in the finance department. Several deadlines are in that corrective action plan. One was 9 days ago to have everything in the financial office staffed. Do you have the financial office staffed, and did you meet that July 15th deadline?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So again, we are meeting every day with DPI to relook at the corrective action plan, and we're working right now to source applicants, right? So the problems that we've had over the last 18 months don't get solved in 2 months. And so we have to be realistic, and we're going to have a conversation about what, deadlines look like and how we move forward. I think we had those in there to ensure that there was some scaffolding around how we can move. But we are, with Todd, we hired Todd Gray. We're actually reaching out to the city to help us procure people that they've hired in their finance department to come and help us. And so we're moving forward with our staffing requirements. We are not quite there yet, but that commitment doesn't go away. Literally just on Monday, we had a call with DPI talking about how we get more applicants in our applicant pool.
So we talked to Todd Gray about a month ago in detail about this corrective action plan, and he said that these dates were attainable. So are you saying that they're not attainable?
I think we have to relook at them. I mean, you just said to me, right, that we've missed a deadline, and now we have to be really honest about that, and I'm willing to have that conversation. Again, we've been trying to hire staff for the last 18 months, right, and so we need to relook at the way we're doing that, and we're going to have to revise some of those deadlines because it is a really, it's an intense process, and we're going to have to understand what is the available staff, how can we move forward, and then pivot from there.
And since that July 15th deadline wasn't met, there's something in the corrective action plan that states that the district has to hire an outside firm to come in to help with those positions, and that there's a contract in place with an accounting firm that needs to be met by July 30th. Where do you stand with that deadline?
So I will have to get back to you about the particulars of that. I'm uncertain, so I will loop back around to you with that answer.
Once all of this financial crisis is behind you, Milwaukee Public Schools has other issues. One of them being that only 14% of the students are proficient in reading and less than 10% are proficient in math. How does the district begin to tackle that problem?
So, as you know, my position as a board member is to provide governance and policy guidance, right? And so, my hope is that with our new interim superintendent, Mr. Galvan, the restructuring and re-envisioning of the Office of Board Governance and the search for a new full-time superintendent, that we really understand that that is a priority that we need to focus on for the next school year. And so I'm hoping that in partnership with all of the stakeholders that move Milwaukee Public Schools forward, we make that an incredible focus. And I actually sit on the School Administration and School Innovation Committee, and we've had a lot of conversations that reading needs to be a pillar of content of that committee for the rest of the year.
Act 20, the reading literacy bill, was passed. Is Milwaukee already doing that? Is Milwaukee already following those guidelines, or is that something that MPS will have to implement?
I think on a full scale we'll have to implement it. What I do know is that we have a subset of teachers who have already been preparing through that curriculum to implement it in our buildings.
And okay, thank you.
Okay. Another criticism of MPS has been that the district hasn't fully implemented its equity policy, which calls for equity-based budgeting and annual reviews of the district's progress on equity. I guess a lot of people feel like resources aren't being equitably distributed throughout MPS. And you yourself criticized the June equity review for being short on metrics. So do you feel the district has fallen short of implementing that equity policy, and what do you think needs to be done about that?
You know, I spend a lot of time in my buildings. I spend a lot of time in central office. And one thing I want to say is there are incredibly brilliant, smart, hardworking people doing work every single day at Milwaukee Public Schools. What I think we need is a re-envisioning and a leader who's going to take us to the next level. And so there's two, you know, I feel like just a broken record. But again, you know, we have a new interim superintendent. We are starting the search for our new superintendent, and we have a new board clerk. So you have a confluence of new executive leaders of a district who now we are asking to bring forward a vision that looks really different. And so my hope is that with all these changes, we're able to have really in-depth conversations from the nitty-gritty. What do presentations look like? What data are you bringing to committee meetings? All the way to like, what is our strategic vision? How are we best serving our kids and our families? And what does that engagement process with our community look like?
And will that change at all how you approach forming the next year's budget?
I can't imagine that it wouldn't, Rory. Yeah, absolutely.
In what ways?
I mean, I can't speak to that right now, right? Because there's so many factors. We have to understand what our third Friday count is. We have to understand the confounding variables that exist. But again, I think it looks like speaking with a new administration, talking with a new board clerk, having more public input at our meetings to really move forward in a vision that feels united around a common goal.
At the end of May, you guys passed the fiscal year 2024 budget moving forward. Part of the corrective action plan was to have the fiscal year 24 certified budget submitted to DPI today. Has that deadline been met?
I have not checked in with our superintendent, but we passed the budget at that meeting, which allows the district to move forward to make those steps to maintain our requirements and obligations to the state.
Are you concerned with all of the deadlines and the tasks that are in the corrective action plan, given the amount of work that has to be done? I know another deadline that has come and passed was staff being trained on standard operating procedures and being implemented. That was supposed to happen last week. Any update on that?
Yeah, I'm not concerned with the deadlines. What I'm concerned with is that we need to relook at our processes. We need to look at the way we do business. And so how are we going to get people on board to do that, right? Do we have the right leader at the helm with Mr. Galvan? Now we do have a leader who's going to be able to look at things really critically and say, here's what wasn't working and here's how we need to change. And I actually have a lot of faith in Mr. Galvan and his ability to lead. I've been watching him in these meetings take leadership over this corrective action plan. And I have a lot of faith that he's going to be able to move this work forward day to day.
So are we following the corrective action plan or are we following the superintendent?
I mean, we're following both. The superintendent is now responsible for the corrective action plan, whether that looks like changing the dates, updating the public on what those metrics look like and what possible dates could be moving.
Like many urban school districts, chronic absenteeism has been a problem, especially since the pandemic. I know that the board changed its policy and also works with the DA's office, but that hasn't helped. What if anything, can help curb chronic absenteeism?
Yeah, I think when I was a community schools coordinator at Bradley Tech High School, we had very similar problems, right? And so what we looked at was the culture and climate of the environment. And in an environment where our public school system is being underfunded and we're not able to recruit and retain teachers because of many other variables in the community, it gets really difficult to do that. We're asking teachers to be social workers, food preparation workers, parents, and so nationally, right, this is a national problem, how are we supporting our teachers and our parents to ensure that the communities and the culture in our school buildings are creating an environment where kids are wanting to show up? And so I think it's kind of a larger question than that, and there are so many moving parts that we have to look at every single one of them.
The state legislature last session wanted to put in more punitive measures. That task force really didn't go anywhere, but it will likely come back. What do you think about doing that for parents and students, kids who aren't going to school?
Yeah, I believe in more of a restorative justice approach to children and how we address the challenges that they're coming to school with. And so I would urge our legislature to also take that approach and to look at the incredible restorative practices program that we've implemented at Milwaukee Public Schools. We've seen really incredible results at the sites that we have in our district that have adopted those.
The district has hired a firm to produce a long-range facilities plan, which could ultimately propose closing schools because of the declining student enrollment in the district. Do you think MPS should close school buildings? And if so, what would you prioritize as a board member in deciding which schools might close?
So the long-range master's plan looks at a variety of inputs and levers to ensure that our district is operating at efficiency, right? So closing schools is one of that, but we're also looking at, our systems of operation. Where are our kids? What does the heat map look like? Where do systems and facilities need to be updated? Where are our green yards need to be updated? And so I think that's one lever of a larger system. And I'm looking forward to that facilities master plan. And I think once we have that and once we have the data, we'll be able to make better decisions.
So do you believe the district should consider closing schools?
I think we have to wait for that long-range facilities master plan to come to us. I really want to make data-driven decisions around experts who are providing us guidance.
Dr. Posley worked for MPS for several years, and Eduardo Galvan has worked for the district for more than 30 years. Is it time to look outside for a superintendent? Can we trust the people who have been working in MPS to solve this problem, who likely knew that this problem existed?
So again, I will reiterate that I have a lot of faith in Mr. Galvan. I have worked with him on a number of occasions, not just on the school board, but when I worked at Rockwell Automation, where we invested millions of dollars in STEM facilities for young girls to come and pursue STEM careers. And when I worked there, you would always see a line around the building of parents who wanted to talk to Mr. Galvan because they felt like he was really a part of the fabric of their community. But we're also embarking on a national superintendent search. And I think the idea of that is to look around the country and see who's best suited to serve our district at this really crucial point in its existence.
We've talked to a lot of parents, teachers, taxpayers, and stakeholders over the last couple of months. They believe that the board has failed not only MPS, but its students significantly. You mentioned 90% of your funding is going to classrooms. Do you feel like you have failed the students?
I feel like this board has taken accountability in a number of ways, right? When we were made aware of the problems, we parted ways with our superintendent. We're going forward in a new vision. You see me standing here in front of you asking these questions. And so, like I said, being elected to office means taking the good with the bad. And I'm prepared to roll up my sleeves and do that really hard work to get us back on a direction that feels good for our community.
This is just a follow-up. I just thought of it. You said you parted ways with your superintendent, you know, that he basically has been a scapegoat all day today. You know, he was the failure. But now your new superintendent, he was recommended by Dr. Posley for his job that he got just before becoming now your interim superintendent. Again, Dr. Posley was with the district for 40 years. This new person for 30 years. So what is changing, really? You said many times you're part-time. You know, you can't do it all. The board's part-time. But the people in leadership have been with the district for decades. So how is anything actually going to change?
I mean, I think it has to change, right? If we're looking at this moment and people in the district, I've been on the board for 3 years, I've already been operating from a place of change. So if we're in a moment where people are looking around at what's going on and thinking that it's going to work the same way, I don't think that's what's going to happen. And I have belief, and I have been told that that's not what's going to happen. And at the same time, we are starting the process of a new superintendent search. And as I said to Jenna, the intent and the hope is to have a national process to look at someone who can come in with a fresh set of eyes and really look at where we are in this moment and respond to that.
See, is this working? Okay. Going off the superintendent search, there's been criticism that with the search for the interim superintendent, there hasn't really been any public engagement with that. And yes, it's an interim position, but still likely for a whole school year and an important school year. Why didn't the board provide more opportunities for that for the interim search? And what can you say that you will provide in terms of public engagement for the national search?
Yeah. You know, listen, we were in a space where we had to move quickly. The corrective action plan required things of us. DPI was looking to us to really ensure that we had a leader at the helm of the district who could help move this corrective action plan forward. So I understand that, and we were in a moment of crisis and needed some stability. When we think about a superintendent search, there are going to be community engagement sessions. We're going to have, you know, events in the district where people can come and have a conversation. This is, I hope all of you show up. I hope the media continues to engage with us through that process. So we're really looking for a robust community stakeholder-based process as we solicit our new superintendent search process.
As Corey mentioned, you're kind of using the CFO position, the superintendent, and the comptroller as scapegoats. The comptroller actually quit. He wasn't fired. We spoke with him after he left his post, and he had only been there for a year at the time, and he said that there was no way that he could physically, mentally, and emotionally get through the system that you had in place. How do you expect to get people to come into this job and take over this massive accounting error and massive system overhaul that needs to happen?
So I want to rephrase it. It's not skateboarding, it's accountability, right? When we were made aware of what was happening, what we did is we took steps to remove the people that we felt were contributing to that problem. And so moving forward, again, we have a completely new set of leaders in the building. And so now we need to set a new tone. The board realizes that, the administration realizes that, and that's how we're going to move forward.
Board members have said that they have felt in the dark about this process. I understand that it's a part-time job, but given that you have a more than $1 billion budget every year to go through, the budget proposal itself is almost 1,000 pages long. Isn't there some sort of accountability that needs to be happening amongst yourselves? Obviously, one person or two people can't be responsible for all of that information. And yes, I understand that you're saying that they're not being seen as scapegoats, but more accountability. But what accountability and checks and balances need to be taken at the board level to make sure that this does not happen again?
Yeah, again, me standing here is accountability, right? Secondly, I have said that we have a new board clerk, and I just sat with her this week. We're looking at what does process look like, what does policy look like, what does constituent services look like, and I think Dr. Owen Moore is going to be a really great partner in us moving forward to reimagine what the Office of Board Governance looks like and what supports are given to school board directors to ensure that we're not in this place again.
The governor has called for financial and instructional audits of the district. Operational, sorry. Are you willing to accept the results and do all of the recommendations that come from both of those audits?
Absolutely. The governor has been a partner in this. DPI has been a partner in this. And so we are going to move forward in partnership with our stakeholders to ensure that the district operates with those recommendations. But we haven't seen, that audit hasn't been implemented yet. They don't have a firm yet. And so we have to really understand what that is moving forward. But we know that the governor is a partner of ours in this. He served as, the head of DPI. And so I think he has a vested interest in seeing Milwaukee Public Schools continue to be successful.
One of the major problems in the finance office was the vacancies, and that's a problem throughout the district. How would you characterize the state of vacancies in MPS? What do you think has contributed to that, and what needs to be done about that?
Yeah, so, the vacancy problem, again, is we're having a national teacher shortage. And so when we think about ways to attract and retain not only teachers, but individuals that work in our administrative departments, we're fighting on two fronts, right? It goes back to what I was saying about the funding issue. How can you attract and retain the best talent when you're not able to compensate them appropriately? And how do you work in the confines of that system, right? So how do you think about signing bonuses? How do you think about giving people incentives like housing to come and work at Milwaukee Public Schools? And I think we've done some of that work really successfully. And so I hope that we'll continue to re-envision how we attract and retain talent.
Oh, it's me. I wanted to ask you about Head Start. The district has announced it's closing many of its Head Start sites and transitioning some others to K-3, which seems like it will come at great cost for the district without having that federal funding. How do you think it was able to, get so bad to that point? The district had a lot of warnings before losing that federal funding. And what will be the loss to the district from that?
So, the district has ensured that our parents and our students who were at those sites are still being taken care of. And in response to the criticism that we're given, we have scaled back now. And so we're only operating at the sites that are serving our students and had the highest number of students that were at those sites. And so the sites that were of concern are no longer operating.
Todd Gray said that this financial crisis wouldn't impact students' learning. This seems like it's impacting students' learning.
So we are looking at ways. Our kids are coming back in September. We've talked a lot about how Todd Gray is going to help us look at a number of levers to pull so that it doesn't impact our kids. And so once we know what that looks like, we'll be able to move forward. But again, we're going to be ready to serve our students when they get into our buildings, no matter what.
Head Start's 1,500 students. So what about those 1,500 students that are
Yep.
impacted by this loss of programming?
We're still providing services to those students, and MPS will continue to provide services to those students.
Part of the city sales tax state agreement was that police officers would be put into MPS schools. Did that ever happen last year?
It did not.
Is it going to happen this year?
We're going to continue to focus on restorative justice as the main lever of serving our kids, and so that is my commitment. I've said that. I've gone on record and said that over and over again, and so that is what I will focus on.
Is the state going to let you do that?
You just said that they missed the deadline, so.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to our media panel for their questions. No, don't go anywhere, because now you get the hard questions from the audience. So
Great.
if you have a question, please be brief, identify yourself, and state your question.
Hi, Gina Stolp. I live in Jilly Gokalgandhi's district. You're my representative at the school board. I have a child at MPS. I understand the seriousness of the challenges that MPS is facing, the ridicule, the conversation that we're having today. I also know that we are in an institution that is extraordinarily resource-strapped, and you have 40,000 people engaged in a recall. How can those 40,000 people support the district at a time when there are simply not enough resources to do everything that you need to do?
Yeah, I think there's two really specific ways. One is we are embarking on a new superintendent search, and so we'll need everybody to come to the table and really help us identify a new leader of this district who can lead us in a time where there's a really large, changing, evolving environment. And the second thing is you have state legislatures, you have state representatives who are responsible for allocating funds. We are sitting on, again, I want to remind you, a $7 billion surplus. So call your state reps and tell them to fund our schools.
Thank you, Sharon Cook. We've been talking about accountability of all sorts of different things, but one accountability you haven't discussed is that legislature and the changes that have been made over the last decade regarding choice, removing many students from public schools, and residency, which has changed much of the fabric of the city. I volunteer in a school where some of the teachers now live out of the city, their kids are out of the city. And back to those 40,000 people as a volunteer, really, go into a school and give them an hour. You'll be amazed what you learn.
Yes, volunteer. Number 3. You usually have 3 asks, right? So that's my third one.
So what about the legislature?
Oh, yeah. Fund our schools. You're sitting on $7 billion of surplus, right? Fund our public schools. Publicly funded schools should get public tax dollars. And I have said that, and I'll say it over and over and over again.
My name is Wayne Youngquist. I'm a graduate of the Milwaukee Public School system. How much do you pay? How much do you spend per student, and how does that compare with other major school districts?
Yeah, so Chris Thiel, our lobbyist, is here. So if you could give me a per pupil, the most recent per pupil dollar and the comparison to our neighboring districts, I know that there is a proportional difference. I don't know the exact money, so I'm going to ask Chris to answer that question. Here.
I can get you the exact number. I think we're in the range of about $13,000 per student. And as was described earlier with this revenue limit situation that the state has, there's variability across the state in terms of how much districts get per pupil. So as you've heard about the referenda that we have passed over the last 4 to 5 years, the one that came a couple years back was actually to catch us up in Milwaukee County to be at about the same place as our neighboring school districts in the region. I don't have that exact information. I could give you a range, but we're comparable to a lot of districts across the country. One of the things that is highlighted a lot that is different is the intensity of poverty in the city of Milwaukee relative to other large urban districts. And so there are different ways at looking at that per pupil funding. Sometimes people kind of divide the total amount of money against the student population and use that figure. I don't think that's necessarily the accurate way to look at things, because you have to bring into perspective the number of students with disabilities, the number of students challenged by poverty, English language learners. So there's some nuance about how you get to that number, but we could try to provide some national information.
If you leave your contact information with me, we'll send you a follow-up email.
Hello, my name is Cindy Carter. I'm from Appleton, and seeing this from the eyes of not in the district, I would like to come to your rescue, because this is not a Milwaukee Public School District's problem. This is a Republican legislative problem. The Republicans all over this country are trying to starve our public school districts into nothingness. And it's not your heads that should be rolling, it's the heads of our Republican legislators. And I commend you for being here, I commend you for what you're doing, and I say to the rest of you, like she said, call your legislators. We need our public schools funded again.
Hi, Aaron Lippman. Thank you, first of all, for being up here. It can't be easy, and I have great respect for people who choose to engage with the school board the way you do. I heard some conflicting comments earlier. You talked about how you believe Milwaukee Public Schools should be governed by a publicly elected, constituent base. Yet at the same time, it's a part-time role, and you have a professional life, personal life to manage. So can you help me understand how we can continue with a 9-member board that is part-time and improve the district outcomes?
Yeah, and I think my response to that was we as a community have to have a discussion about what is the expectation, right? I fundamentally, philosophically believe that we should have a publicly elected school board, but then what does that mean for our community? What does that look like in terms of time commitment? What does that look like in terms of what we expect for them? So I think that's a conversation we need to start having with our community.
Hi, my name's Chris Fons. I'm a retired Milwaukee Public School teacher. Both of my children go to Milwaukee Public Schools. I think we should really look at this excruciating cross-examination of the school board as very telling of our community. I mean, do we do this for the head of the MMAC or NML or all these other institutions? No. When I listen to public radio, or I listen to read the Journal Sentinel, or to any of the other outlets, we don't see this kind of, what did you do with that $1,300? Or what's happening here and what's happening there? There has been a concerted effort to destroy Milwaukee Public Schools for at least 40 years, from the top down, and lately, the richest people in this community spend over $1 million to keep money from the poorest people in this community. And who are we examining? Is the publicly elected school board, and putting them up at noon on a Wednesday and saying, what did you do wrong? What did you do wrong? We're not looking at the larger resources that are spent in this community. We are looking at the public institutions that are actually trying to do good in the community. It's an upended system that we have, particularly in the media now, who seem to be carrying water for the MMAC and other organizations. It's really, quite awful to see this kind of journalism. I see it as gotcha journalism at its worst. At its worst. I don't think you do. I've listened to you all hour.
The thing is, we would love to look into Northwestern Mutual's books, but they're a private company, so you can't. No, you actually can't. Private companies you can't look into because they're private. Taxpayer money goes into Milwaukee Public Schools. It goes into the city of Milwaukee. It goes in. MMAC. I'm just responding. We're not attacking.
People don't know where finances go. It's our job to find out. I'm a taxpayer. You guys.
I live in the city of Milwaukee. I pay taxes to Milwaukee Public Schools. And I want them to succeed because it would ruin my home value if they don't, and it ruins my kids. I don't, okay.
Hey, Quentin Claybon, first, as your constituent, thanks for doing stuff like this. I really do appreciate it. I have a tough question I don't think you would answer, so I'll go with one I think you would answer.
Okay, let's start with the one I would answer.
Yes.
And then what's the time, Marianne?
Yes. I kind of think the state and local officials maybe blew it. I understand the convention took precedence, but really no changes are going to happen before the school year starts. So I would love to know, could you give us an update on what input, what assistance, mayor's office, county executive, governor have offered, or DPI have offered so far? And then where would you like to see them help out with Milwaukee Public Schools? If you could get specific, teacher apprenticeships, business partnerships, that sort of thing. Thank you.
So starting with the governor's office, we've obviously seen Corey, mention the operational and the instructional audits that the governor will be doing. We've also been keeping them abreast of any progress we've made. We let them know about our interim superintendent, our intent to start our superintendent search. So we've been in communication just sort of letting them know what's going on. The county exec has offered their support, his support as well. I think the bulk of the support has come, and comments have come from the mayor. You've seen him say he'd like to be involved in the superintendent search process. You've seen him say that his comptroller's office will be lending support. We've actually, really specifically reached out to him to help procure, people who have applied in his office to send resumes so we can hire them in our office potentially. And we intend on including him in the superintendent search. And so we speak with our other locally elected officials regularly to keep them in the loop of what's going on. And I think, like you've heard me say in this moment, it is a time to say we need help, and that is okay, because the success of Milwaukee Public Schools is the success of our community, and I think they see that too. Are you going to ask me the hard one now?
And again, there has to be a breakdown somewhere. Milwaukee performing against its large urban peers, and I would love to know your perspective on where that breakdown is. Is it at the district superintendent level? Is it at the kind of principal level? Is it at the teacher level? You don't need to have all the answers, but in order to ask really good questions, you have to have a sense of where is the breakdown happening, and hopefully the answer's not everywhere. Hope to God. But yeah, what's your perspective?
Yeah, and so breakdown, can you say more when you say breakdown?
Yeah, example, it could be principals don't have sufficient ability to shape their buildings, or it could be district superintendents are not, active on the ground. Where's the breakdown in quality in services happening?
Yeah, so, we're a part of the League of Great City Schools. We're part of organizations that our administrators, our teachers go and present to. I, as an elected official, am a part of school board cohort groups where I look across the country with large urban school districts similar to Milwaukee to understand exactly what you're asking. And I think what you're seeing nationally is this idea of paying and respecting our educators. This is fundamentally where much of the breakdown is occurring, right? We're asking teachers to go to a 4-year institution, get a certification, come and teach for basically wages that aren't family sustaining the future of our country. That's ridiculous. So let's pay our teachers more. Breakdown number 1 right there. Let's pay our teachers more.
Do we have time for one more question, if there is one? If not, we will say thank you to Jilly Gokalgandhi. Thank you again to Jenna, Rory, and Corey for their questions and for your questions. Just a couple of things before we wrap up. Thanks again to our event sponsors in the Newsroom Pub and Safe House for being the hosting sponsor of this event. If you are not a member of the Milwaukee Press Club and you're interested in that, please go to MilwaukeePressClub.org or see